Hi, folks, and welcome to the April edition of the WinUI Community Call. My name is Gabby, and I'll be your host for this morning, afternoon, or evening. Before we get started today, I wanted to say that I was recently made aware that there might be a fire drill in the office that we're currently located in for today. So if that does happen during the middle of this call, we might abruptly cut this short, but we are hoping that that doesn't happen. So a little bit about the call. It takes place on the third Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We're looking towards our next call. It's supposed to be around May 17th. It's supposed to be May 17th, but we know that that's also the time around build. So we might be moving this call to better coordinate with messaging across build. If you're new, here is our GitHub. We have both WinUI and Windows App SDK, and then you can follow us on Twitter for the latest updates. I like to say this call is live, but we also keep a recording of it. So if you are new, take a look at this What is WinUI page for more context. So today we'll be talking a little bit about some new features that we've been working on that are currently included in File Explorer, as well as giving some updates about WinApp SDK 1.3.0. And of course, leaving some time for some Q&A that we've gathered from both the live chat here and what is posted currently on GitHub. So with that, I'll start us off by introducing a few folks talking about Photo Gallery and File Explorer. So let me add them to the stream. All right. Hello, Dilip, Karen, Marissa, and Regis. Let's see. Let's start off with Marissa.
Cool. Thanks, Gabby. Hey, everyone. Like Gabby said, my name is Marissa. I'm a PM on the WinUI team, and I'm excited, along with Karen, Dilip, and Regis, to talk about some new controls we're hoping to ship in 1.4 and what you'll see in the new File Explorer gallery page. So we've been hearing for a while that developers would like more customization when it comes to the rendering and visualization of the grid view and list view controls. And we've not only been getting this feedback from external customers, but we've been getting it from internal partners as well. And one of the internal partners we've worked really closely with to address this problem is File Explorer. They wanted to create this new gallery page where users could see all of their pictures in a flat list in a modern UI, and also have the ability to change that UI based off of feature requirements and do it really easily. So to suit that level of customization, we decided to make a new collections control called Items View and take advantage of some of the newer building blocks we have available in WinUI. So Items View is actually based on Items Repeater. So along with Items View, we've created a few other controls, but we're going to highlight two of them today. They're Item Container and River Flow Layout. We've also created a new scroll bar control called Annotated Scroll Bar, and you can see it on the right side of the picture of File Explorer. It is a control that helps users easily navigate large collections of data via visual labels to show where they are in the collection. So you can check out all of these controls in action in the File Explorer gallery experience that's available today in the Windows Insider build in the dev channel. And yeah, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Regis to talk about Items View and the River Flow Layout.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm Regis. I'm going to be talking about those new controls. Like Marissa said, Items View is a new collections control designed for the purpose to showing collections of entities. In this particular case, for the photos gallery, it's a series of pictures. So the Items View is like the previous collection controls. It has an item source property, which feeds the data, and an item template to customize the look of those items. And it is the one control that stitches together the individual building blocks that we have been building in the last few years, including the item container, which is a successor, if you want, of the list view item and grid view item that were used by the previous collection controls, list view and grid view. We also build a new scroller and zoomer, which is a successor to the old scroll viewer. We call it the scroll view control, which has an internal primitive called the scroll presenter. And both of these controls are based on a new composition component called the interaction tracker, as opposed to the old scroll viewer that was using Win32 API set called direct manipulation. Another pluggable component that is used by the items view is element animator that allows you to animate the individual items as the collection changes. And it also makes use of UI-less component called the selection model, which keeps track of the selection status of all the individual items in the collection. So Gabi, let's talk about the next slide. A few benefits of the items view control. We really focused on performance, and which involves a lot of virtualization and recycling of the items as the user scrolls through the collection. One big benefit of the items view is that you can switch among different layouts on the fly at runtime, which is something that none of the old controls was able to do. And you can plug in your own custom components, like a custom layout. The river flow layout is one of those layouts, but you can create your own and plug it in, as well as a custom animator. And the scroll view control also has its own benefits. One of them being you now have the ability to control the curves when there is an animation from scroll offset A to scroll offset B. You can control the animations, which was not the case in direct manipulation. Gabi, let's talk about river flow layout. So river flow layout is a particular layout. The primary purpose of this layout is to show collection of pictures, and that is the one that is used in the photos gallery of File Explorer. And it is one of those pluggables layout. Let's run the demo, Gabi. This is a fraction of a test app that exercises the APIs of the items view. And the first thing I'm going to do is pick the uniform grid layout and populate the items view with a collection of pictures. So this grid layout is basically column and row based. I'm setting the separation between the items first. I'm changing the justification of the lines, and I will be switching to the river flow layout on the fly. I'm not sure what's happening. Here we go. Here we go. I'm selecting the river flow layout and changing the justification of the items. First, I'm adding some separation between the lines and the items within the lines. And finally, turning on the fill capability so that the items will fill every single line, which involves cropping of the images. Finally, I'm switching the selection mode to extended. I will be selecting 3 items and switching the layout back to uniform grid layout, and you will see that the selection is preserved after the layout switch, which is one of the benefits of the control as well. And that's it for me. I think Karen will be talking about the item container in particular. Thank you.
Yeah, so the item container are the individual lightweight and flexible building block that you saw in Regis's demo. So every individual image here, I guess, on the right is an item container. So it's similar to list view item, but it's can be used individually with the items view or any other layout or host controls. And Gabby, if you can play the video. Is it playing? Is the video playing? I'll continue anyway. So as on the right, as you can see, there's an item selected. So it has built-in selection states, visuals, theming, accessibility, pointer and keyboard handling, as well as just interaction events. It's also optimized for performance as well, just like the items view. So for example, we minimized the amount of items in the visual tree. And in the multiple selection mode, there's actually a checkbox, and that checkbox is also a custom rect as well to just get rid of as much items in the tree as possible. Cool, and that's it for me. I think Dilip will be going next.
Yep. I'm going to introduce the annotated scroll bar control. Let's see if we can get the slides back.
Sorry about that, folks. My internet just went out, so here that goes with the video and the slides as well. So give me just a moment to get back on up. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think, the video playback for the recorded videos might be a little bit choppy. But I'm hoping I can resolve. Just a minute.
Gabby, I think as you're loading that, I have been seeing a couple of questions about if these controls are going to be released to the public. And right now, they're actually in the experimental release of WinApp SDK 1.3. We are working on getting them towards stable, and along with that, there will be API documentation. There will be pages for it in the WinUI gallery. So that we are working on that. It is part of what we're trying to do to get everything stable. So cool. Go ahead, Dylan. Or Karen, whoever wants to go next.
I think I'm next. Gabby, if you could switch the slides. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I can introduce the control. I don't see the slides, but I think I can introduce the control because it's okay. Awesome. I see them now. So the annotated scroll bar is a control that helps users easily navigate through a large collection of items. It replaces the default scroll bar and can be used in conjunction with any scrollable container. So scroll can be achieved via two interfaces, iScroll controller, which standardizes communication with the scroll presenter component that Regis was talking about earlier, which allows for easy coupling with scroll view. Range base is another interface which allows you to create your own bridge between the annotated scroll bar and some scrollable container. So now I'll take you through the demo video of this control. Gabby, if you could play this video. So users can see like category labels on the scroll bar area to provide a visual reference of where they are within the collection. A pending indicator, the accent colored line you can see indicates the user's current position in the collection. So we have scroll arrows that are located at the top and bottom of the scroll bar area. They can be used to move the current position by a small increment. Yeah, I think video playback is a bit choppy, but you can see that there's a tooltip when the user hovers over the scroll bar area. The tooltip contains a label to give more information to the user about their current position in the collection. Users can also click and drag anywhere on the scroll bar to navigate to a new position within their collection. As they drag, a pending indicator stays attached to the mouse cursor and the content scrolls to reflect the new position. When the user clicks, they can navigate to a specific area in the collection. For experiences optimized for touch input, users can also tap and hold on the scroll bar area and to see the tooltip. The tooltip will be slightly more elevated to make it easier to read for touch users. And tapping and dragging anywhere on the scroll bar works similarly to click and drag with mouse. And also, as you can see, the scroll bar adapts to changing control size to avoid label collision and labels going out of bounds. That was just a quick overview of the scroll bar, and I'll pass it back to Gabby, I think.
Thanks, folks. And sorry for all the tech issues that I started just clipping through the videos to get some screenshots, more GIF-like. But I really appreciate you sharing all these new controls. And excited to see where these can go for the future. So thank you much. Let me go to the next slide, and then I'll take you off. Thank you. Great. So our next kind of piece of info is sharing the availability of WinApp SDK 1.3. So you can use this link to, if you haven't tried it out yet, to download the NuGet package. Use this to check out the release notes, as well as see the updated gallery with 1.3. The WinUI 3 gallery is updated for 1.3, but we haven't made it a lot of changes for many new controls or such. So as mentioned previously, what's new in 1.3? The focus of this was to improve dev efficiency. So there's a lot of behind the scenes updates, including making it easier to debug your app through improved error handling. So improvements to unhandled exception catching and a new event for failed XAML resource lookup. Simpler to use APIs for some existing features like window.app window and window.system backdrop. And then we have both internal and publicly visible milestones tracking the different fixes that can help improve the quality of your app. And as mentioned earlier, we've also updated the WinUI Gallery Template Studio and the Visual Studio WinUI templates for this release. So check out those milestones on GitHub for a little bit more info about those. So next up, we'll actually have Chris come on to chat a bit about one of those bugs that we've recently fixed. Chris, about to add you on. Great, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to talk about this. There were several bugs filed, reported from slightly different scenarios, but the end result was people had high refresh rate monitors, but their experience with WinUI 3 was that there were times that they were getting lower than normal refresh rates. So my team works on some of the low-level animation and scheduling code that XAML builds off of. So this one of these bugs made it to my team. We went to investigate it. And I have a lot of sympathy for people who are experiencing the bug. It may be a little bit hard to believe, but when you're searching for the bug and sometimes you have trouble finding it, it can take a little bit of time. And we were looking in the wrong place. We kept looking in the animation code. It has a history of having bugs in this area, and the code had gone through a lot of churn. So we kept looking at different animation scenarios, trying to debug on 240 hertz monitors, which anyone who has tried to debug a timing issue on high refresh, it's tricky. You can't use your normal debugging techniques. First of all, timing, you break in the debugger and that breaks it. But also if you turn on a lot of tracing, that fails as well because your machine is no longer running at 240 hertz. So it took us a while as we were investigating to convince ourselves that the code that we were looking at was actually correct and behaving properly. And then we got a solid repro. And once you see it, you know that you're hitting it. And we hit this specifically when scrolling in a scenario. And when doing this, we're reliably getting 30 frames per second on a 240 hertz monitor, which is clearly wrong and definitely slower than what normal 60 FPS is. So we debugged it, we looked into it, and with help between the two teams, we found that it was a problem when the XAML UI thread was involved. And so this is why it only occurred on some scenarios and not others. Scrolling does involve the XAML UI thread. It needs to know what's going on. It needs to handle the updates to the scroll bar. And what we found was there was code that was trying to make sure it wasn't running too fast. There's a balance between relying on the system for when it says the monitor is refreshing, and that's not always running. There's times when the monitor is off and it returns right away. So there was some checks in place to make sure that the XAML codebase wasn't running too fast. And this was kicking in on high refresh monitors. So the monitor was returning so quickly that the system thought that something was going wrong. And so it was throttling it. So under these conditions, the code was only getting 30 hertz or 30 frames per second. So what was the fix? There were two sets of fixes for this. On Windows 10, the code was updated to trust the wait for vBlank call from the primary monitor. So even if it returned more quickly, we would rely on it and we would say, yes, this is correct, even if it was only 4 milliseconds later, which is a 240 hertz monitor. And we used a simulated vBlank only when the monitor was off. And then on Windows 11, we use a new system API call, which is wait for compositor clock, which is an API that very reliably tells us when the system compositor is waking up to do processing for another frame. And so on Windows 11 and future, the XAML codebase should be reliably waking up on that time. And the slow refresh or update problem should be gone. So with 1.3, we really want everybody to hammer away on this. And if you still see anything with the latest updates, to please let us know.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. That was really insightful. Appreciate it. Great. And then we have one last little spotlight here. Last minute, talking a little bit about tempo. So Mike, I'm going to add you on. Great. Hi, Mike.
Hello. Let me share my screen.
Great.
Is that coming through?
Yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to do was just share a little bit about experience creating an app in WinUI 3. Just to show a little bit of some of the experiences that we go through. This is actually, this is not it. This is an older version of the app that I started with. But the purpose of the app is to show APIs. I created this in my, like as a hobby project, and then I use it probably almost daily at work because I like to do a lot of spending time doing API design. So it's kind of a mix of a personal project and a actual something I can apply during the day. So anyway, this is what I started with. Like I say, it's an API viewer, so you can search. Just looking at the Windows APIs right now, so you can do a search and it finds an API. Like I said, this is the version that I started with is the WPF version, and then this is a version that I converted into WinUI 3. Just a quick look at the app itself. You know, you search for button, obviously it finds a button class. You find a lot of other things too, like it finds checkbox, because checkbox derives from button. So it's looking at various things. It finds call control because its DLL has the word button in it. It is showing some some help information that's coming from the public documentation. So you've got, and this is the same text that you see in IntelliSense and Visual Studio. So it's got some extra information there with documentation. You can also jump straight to the documentation page. And because you can't take anything too far, it's also got a web view 2 in here that shows the same documentation page. The screen resolution is kind of small right now, so it's kind of hard to see everything, but that actually turned out to be more useful than I expected it to be. let's see, a couple other quick things. Like right now it's showing the Windows APIs. You can show the WinApp SDK APIs, and what it does for that is downloads it off in NuGet, and then you can load any DLL or WinMD or NupKeg. Like right now it's got Newton JSON soft loaded, and so it shows the APIs from JSON, the Newton soft JSON. Okay, so then I just wanted to walk through some of the interesting things I went through. So in WPF, you've got this ribbon of possibilities up here with all kinds of options for searching. And so I rethought that as I moved it into WinUI 3. A lot of things I moved into, like some of the most common things I moved into menus in the command bar. And then for the really detailed things, I created a little flyout dialog where I can set all these different options that were in the ribbon before. And then some of the other things are scattered over here on the home page too. So as part of the experience I went through. Let's see. Maybe I'll just take a look, show the code project. I mentioned that I had it in WPF, so I created a big solution. I've got a WPF project in it. This here started out as a UWP project. Now it's a WinUI 3 project. This here is a .NET standard project. It used to be a portable class library, so this solution has gone through a lot of phases. And then I'll just quickly call out some of the more interesting things I think that I went through. So I mentioned that it was UWP. One of the things I did is ran the .NET upgrade assistant to convert it from UWP to WinUI 3. And then I'll just quickly show the commit. So the first commit here is just the tool running. And so you can see it did a lot of work, most of the work oriented around or much of the work anyway, oriented around namespace changes. Second commit is work that I had to do to get it to build. And so not too many changes. Most of them were related to the app model, which isn't surprising. And then the third commit was actually getting it to run. So I only had to make fewer changes there. And so the whole thing took me 45 minutes, which I was very surprised by, very pleasantly surprised by. And just calling out some of the things. So the structure of the app is what you might expect. It's got a view and a whole bunch of view models. The view model is what's implemented in the .NET standard library. There's a bunch of async work in here. And so like this is doing the actual API search here, and it's async. So while one is running, another one could start running. So I don't know if there's better patterns for this. The pattern I took is I keep a global counter, and then when the search completes, I only pay attention to the last one that was started. These are async properties here that I'm using for data binding. There's no such thing as an async property, but it's just an approach. The first time it doesn't return anything, but it kicks off a async method to go and calculate the expensive result. And then at the end of that, raises a property change and the view updates automatically. This is another thing I found handy. Sometimes I'd have a text block, and sometimes there's an API description, sometimes they're not. And so this is basically a little behavior here that collapses this so it doesn't take up space if there's nothing to show. Other handy things I did. I don't know if I showed it. There's teaching tips in here. There we go. So there's teaching tips in here that pop up the first time you use the app after a new feature has been added. And so there's some logic here to show only one teaching tip at a time, and then to show new teaching tips as they show up. This here there's a help window in here. And to do that, it uses the Community Toolkit's Markdown reader. So the help text can all be written in Markdown. It uses the app instance APIs to be single instance. So if you start it twice, instead of creating two copies, it forwards a second launch over to the first copy. And I think there's a protocol handler in here too. So you can start it up by typing ;; and then whatever your search string is, and it'll launch the app and start that search. Uses app execution aliases, so you can just type tempo, or you can see sort of UWP in its name, but the alias it typed in the command line is tempo, and that launches it. And then real quick, it uses a lot of reflection. It's based on reflection. The reflection library it uses is this library that's part of .NET, which is kind of difficult to use. So I created another library on top of it to make it easier to use. And that's it. Those are my experiences.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you sharing that tool. And with that, I think we are going to start our Q&A. So let me get folks on the screen. Right, this is Savoy. Hi, Savoy.
Hey, Gabby, am I coming through?
Yeah, Mike's got a little bit of feedback, but I think you might just have to be muted when you're not chatting. All right. Alrighty. And with that, I think we might be ready for questions.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've been having a hearty discussion in the chat today. Chris, if you're open to it, maybe we can start with you, since it sounds like there's a lot of interest in your bug deep dive. Folks were asking if you know if this happens to be fixed in Inbox XAML or just WinUI XAML.
Yes, that's a good question. We do not think that the bug exists in Inbox or System XAML. That code was leveraging a different API that provided it with statistics and information on when the monitor was updating. WinUI, the WinUI version wasn't able to call that API for various reasons, and so that's part of the reason that this bug ended up manifesting. Is we couldn't rely on that. This old code with some checks and balances kicked in, but now we've moved to the newer composition API on Windows 11, which should make it more reliable. And we also provided a fix for Windows 10. So, sorry, coming back to the original question, we do not think that this exists in System Inbox XAML.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And like we've been doing the last few times, folks feel welcome to jump in if there's questions that you feel ready to tackle. Otherwise, I can try and pull a few out of the hat here.
Actually, I'll go ahead and jump in on one. So there's been a number of questions about open source, and let's just go ahead and tackle this one right off the top. We absolutely acknowledge that this is something that is top of mind, and we get a lot of questions about this. It is something that we are actively working on, and would love to have something to announce today, but we don't have that today. But it is something that is absolutely being worked on. The team has had lots and lots of discussions about this, and pushing to get that done and get something that meets all of our requirements. But we can't announce anything today, but we are actively working on it.
The one I'll jump into, and maybe one thing I'll mention here, is that we are a little under a month out from build. So some updates on things like roadmaps and open source and stuff like that, I suspect that we'll probably have more to say there too. So that's that.
And great plug for build in general, Ryan.
Yeah, I guess that I can use that as a segue too, because there was a person who asked a question around, hey, I only see one session on WinUI at build. Should I be worried about? I'm sorry, I'm butchering I'm definitely paraphrasing that. I can't find it in the spreadsheet now, but the question was basically, hey, what's going on with build? I only see one WinUI session at build. Should I be concerned? First of all, the answer is no. We actually generally don't have much more than one session anyway, even in past builds. But this build is also sort of special in that there's a few things that'll be a little bit different about this build. First of all, it's going to be the first hybrid build and the first time we're doing an in-person component since the pandemic. So that's really exciting to sort of like get back and have an opportunity to see people in person. That's going to be, I think, really exciting. And at this particular build this year, there's actually quite a smaller number of sessions because we wanted to have less contention between sessions and more sort of centers of mass around it. There's also different types of sessions. So like at previous builds, it was basically just every session was get up, run through a PowerPoint slide deck and talk about technology. This year at Build, there's like, aside from the keynote, there's 5 types of sessions. There's traditional breakouts, like what most people think of, but then there are discussions, demos, on-demand sessions. There's something called labs. And so we actually also had an opportunity to sort of like pick what we thought the best type of session would be for WinUI. We really felt that the discussion session would make a lot of sense. Discussion sessions are kind of like unscripted breakouts. They're an opportunity for us to have a two-way conversation with the audience. Since people pepper us with a lot of questions on these community calls, people are always asking about what's the status of this or that. We really wanted to have sort of that two-way communication. And so I'm really excited about the session that will be happening at Build. We'll be talking about WinUI, our partnership with File Explorer, but also having the opportunity for people to ask any questions they want.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the build info, Ryan. Did anyone have anything they want to jump in with? I have some questions here I can toss to the room.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in on a couple of these. There were some questions in the community call discussion about the C++ WinRT debug visualization. There were a couple of issues that were identified there. One of them has to do with metadata that's part of the Windows App SDK. And we are looking at a better developer experience there so that you get visualization of types that are in the Microsoft namespaces. The metadata itself is part of the NuGet package, and so it's certainly available. It's just that the debug visualization logic isn't aware of that. I did provide a workaround for that, but ideally this would just be automatic and you would have that support. The other part of the question there had to do with support for generic types, which is mostly collections, but there's also iReference and so on. And that unfortunately is a kind of a thorny area. It's difficult to implement that. So I did run it by the current owner of that, Ryan Shepard, to see if he had any thoughts on that. I myself looked at it a couple of years ago, and it's pretty difficult to implement that. So I don't know how soon we'd be able to get to that. We'd love to be able to get to that, but that's the current state of that. I'll grab another one too while I have the mic, and that is functions related to UWP that have caused errors that should be removed. There was a good discussion on that a couple days ago. And I confess that this is, I have to say, that it really helps these community call discussions. It helps to prioritize the backlog. We could do a better job at prioritizing the backlog. Some of these issues, I just am not aware how important these are. And that's part of where we could do a better job of giving tools to be able to upvote and so on. These particular APIs, because they don't work, I would have just assumed that people wouldn't be calling them. But there's enough pain and suffering, I think, in migrating a UWP app, just as Mike has demonstrated, where these calls might be in the code base and they crash and you have no idea why. So things like window.current. So yes, we'll make a priority of getting those decommissioned, deprecated, removed, and so on. That's an ABI breaking change, obviously, so that has to go into a version 2 at some point. But I just wanted, as a meta point, to say that I appreciate hearing that feedback in the discussion so that we know how to prioritize those items.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
I can jump in here and answer another question. Sunil was asking about if the high refresh rate issue was an example of issues arising from having two compositors. The short answer to that is no. My team does work on the Microsoft UI composition layer. So you can think of that as the lifted compositor. And honestly, that's why we spent a lot of time looking and debugging, because we thought at first that the bug was in our code, but it really actually had nothing to do with the layering of the compositors. The bug entirely was in the XAML code base, as it was trying to answer the question of when should I wake up to do updates. And it's trying to understand what the system is doing. Its calls and logic have nothing to do with a lifted compositor. So in this case, it's not an issue between the two, and it was entirely in the XAML code base.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Did anyone else have anything they want to jump in with?
Actually, I can jump in on a couple.
Go for
so kind of follow-ups. One was a question about, for the new controls that we were showing with the gallery control and all of that, will those eventually be make it into WinUI 3 into the public release? And the answer is that is our plan, that we are hoping for all of the things that we're putting into File Explorer, that we will make use of that and expose that and get that into the public, and all the things that come in with that. So not only having that, but then using those controls eventually in WinUI Gallery, in the various places, and getting that. That also then comes in that they would be a part of it. And when we are able to do anything with open source, then that would be, they would be a part of that, and it would be available there. The other question that was asked is, for open source, is that something that we are looking to do more in bits and pieces, or is that going to be an all at once? And these are exactly the kinds of details that we're talking about, and looking at balancing getting something out quicker versus usability versus, how applicable is it going to be and how useful for the community. All of those things are part of the discussion on kind of what is the best way to do it.
All right. Thanks, Bob. If no one's ready with any other questions, let me maybe turn it to some of the questions we took on GitHub over the week. Bob, this one I think is directed towards you. Matt Lacey is asking if WinApp Driver is still connected to our team and whether we have updates on that.
Sure. So WinApp Driver is one of those items that the ownership has definitely been passed around a bit. And at this point, the project is still alive, but we're not putting a lot of resources on it. And so it is something, if you look at the number of changes that have gone into the project, that it's had very minor updates, essentially updating dependencies and things like Newtonsoft, etc. But outside of that, but that is not the same as it being dead. It's in sort of a maintenance mode with not a lot of active development, but it is still alive.
Thanks for sharing, Bob. I think
I
actually
get fun questions today.
It actually looks like Scott covered quite a few we got on GitHub. Let me jump back over to some we received on the call.
While you're doing that, Savoy.
Go for it, Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention the publish single file. I'd love to get some clarity on that. As far as I am aware, it's fundamentally unsupported to use the .NET publish single file capability with an app that doesn't have trivial Xcopy deploy behavior, which is certainly the case for packaged apps. With unpackaged, of course, you have to find a way to get the runtime installed. And so it certainly is true, goes 1372, that we need to have a better story at a minimum. We need to issue a build error or build warning saying that that's incompatible. But I want to make sure I understand what's expected here. I don't know that it would be satisfying if we just simply broke the build moving forward as a response to that issue. So if there's some more clarity that we could add to that, that would be great.
Thanks, Scott. Bob, this is a question I think that was in your direction. Kevin is asking if the File Explorer controls that we showed off today are only for WinUI 3. And if so, does, that actually, yeah, let's start there.
Yes, the new controls and the things, there are no plans to bring those into WinUI 2 or SystemXAML. And so it would be in WinUI 3.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Chris, let me know if you already answered this, but Sunil was asking if there's any word on how someone can interop between windows.ui.composition and WinUI 3 XAML.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. As of right now, I don't have an answer for that. And part of the reason is, with the two compositors and the code developing, we're still exploring and understanding the best times to use each compositor. And so right now we kind of reserve the right to change our minds in the balance between the two. And if we expose, depending on how we expose interop, that could compromise our ability to do that. I would kind of throw the question back to you, Sunil, to follow up offline with us so we can better understand what scenario you think you would need better interop between the two compositors, and we can work together to figure out what the right solution is.
Awesome.
So
thanks, Chris. Go for it, Scott.
There was also a question related to published trimmed. I am aware that there's some issues there with support for published trimmed. Most of that support comes out of the C# WinRT tool chain, and there are some open issues on that repo. So that question had been asked in the community call discussion. So yes, I think there's some scenarios where it works, and there are some where it does not, where we have aggressive trimming, and so types are not found at runtime. So we're still working through some of that. It's a new technology, so there's some rough edges there.
Thanks, Scott. Mike, Bob, maybe a question for one of you, but Christopher is asking if we plan to provide a selection changed event for tree view.
I bet Bob and I both don't know of any plans for that. I remember the part of the complication with that being that with the tree view, you're working in a hierarchy rather than a list, like with the list view. But I don't think we have any effort going on it right now.
I think so. It is on our radar to bring it to stable, but like Mike said, we have to work through some of those details before we bring it to stable. So it's on the radar. We're hoping to do it, but we need to work through some of the details.
Good answer.
Thanks, Marissa.
Since I have the mic support, I can take another question.
Go for it.
So someone was asking, I think it was Martin, about the ribbon control and if that is going to be something that's coming to WinUI. And what a lot of the apps are starting to do is move towards using the command bar for a ribbon type experience. And this is mostly to simplify what users can do in the, like that ribbon experience. So a lot like File Explorer and other apps are moving towards using command bar. So that's what we're suggesting people do.
Awesome. Thanks, Marissa. And I saw a question from Michael pop up that I can actually answer. Michael asked, are there many of the WinUI engineers going to be at Build in person? Michael, it actually happened to be my job to sign up several of our engineers to be at Build in person, and I can answer yes. You'll be delighted to see that we have several there. Scott's one.
Yeah, I think there's going to be at least 4 engineers if we, and then a bunch of PMs as product managers as well. So we'll be there in force.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Also, Ryan, I don't know if it was just me, but your audio came through a little laggy there.
Oh,
But
sorry. Is
we
it
could-
still laggy?
It is, but we can hear you. It's just got a weird reverb. Maybe it's the right word. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Folks, feel free to jump in if you have questions you're ready to answer. Until then, Mike, Alex is asking if we know if there's a cross-platform version of the API viewer.
No, something looked at, be something fun to play with, but not something that I've worked on yet. I made a comment that to Steve in the chat that it's on GitHub right now, but it's still private in the repo, but I'm going to flip it public soon. Actually, there's a couple of repos. One of them's public, one of them's private, but I'm going to flip it public soon.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that, Mike. I didn't realize that Steve was talking about the tempo tool. I thought he was talking about the UWP to WinUI migration tool. Okay.
He might have been, actually. Yeah, it was kind of ambiguous, not knowing the timing when he asked the question.
There was a question that Shivendra Singh asked about publishing unpackaged apps requiring a certificate for code signing in MSIX or AppX. I'm not clear on what's going on there, given that an unpackaged app by definition does not involve an MSIX or AppX. So happy to answer that if we can just get a little clarity on the scenario.
Thanks, Scott. Chris, I think there's a question in here. Michael is asking, I'd really appreciate a little workshop or just GitHub back and forth on what is keeping ink on hold, especially custom drawing. I assume the second compositor is the problem. Is that something we feel ready to talk to?
Yeah, I can talk about that some. Ink, I know you're talking about custom drawing or custom dry ink, but ink in general is a system compositor feature. And really what we're talking about is how do we properly layer content that's generated within the process with other system content. Ink is one example of this, but it's not the only one. So what I have to say about this is a very well-known problem, and it has kind of some. It's not a one-off that's necessarily easy to solve all of inking scenarios for, and we want it to provide a robust solution. So my team actually is working on the architectural improvements to the lifted compositor that would allow more easily mixing of system and in-proc content. So we are working on it. I'm sure we could provide better communication on it and progress. But it is in progress, and I agree. A workshop would be interesting to, at a minimum, better communicate, what the underlying problems are and what we're doing to try to solve them. But it is on our radar. We do care about it, and we are making steady progress against it.
A question for Scott. We have a few folks here, Luke and Lawrence, asking about AOT or native AOT support for WinApp SDK. Is that something you have thoughts about?
I'm looking at the C#WinRT repo now. There are a few open issues on native AOT. This is where the work needs to be done. As you know, native AOT has been rolled out progressively in stages of implementation in .NET 6, 7, 8. So it's a journey. And as far as I'm aware, the tent pole right now is C#WinRT has some open issues there. I did ask Mano, the team lead, about this, I think, after the last community call, and he said that the issues are in work. They're just a bit complex to deal with. So it's projection technology, which is tricky to work with. So, but if you've got questions about that, I would recommend going to the CS1RT GitHub repo, open issues, upvote existing issues, and so on.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
About that open source question a minute ago about the upgrade assistant tool itself, that is on GitHub. I put a link into the chat. Do links into the chat work?
I think Gabby might have to post them
Okay.
from the official handle.
It's searchable.
And then one issue that Kevin Gallahan posted about Xbind and the XAML compiler, just please reference issues on GitHub and just include the issue number on that. That is something that we are looking at, and yeah, just to call to get more details on the exact scenario, we will take a look at that.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. While we reach for last questions here, Mike, I believe Kevin was asking if you're enjoying being back in the office.
Yeah, the traffic's a lot worse. The commute's a lot worse. But it's nice bumping into people in the hallways and in the kitchen.
See, Bob, here's a question that it's all right if you don't have an answer for this yet, because it sounded like discussions are still in progress. But Story Builder was asking regarding open source. When it happens, do we expect that it will happen all at once or in bits and pieces?
So I think I answered that, but I can take it again. That's a lot of the discussions that we're having is how is the best way to do it, and from a methodology standpoint, and what format should that come in? There are a lot of options that are available, and choosing on what is going to be the most efficient way and the way that is going to be best for the community and for us, that is going to be the best use of resources and getting that done. So those are the kinds of details that we are hammering out as we speak.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Chris, coming over to you for that question we were looking at from Michael, who said that they have a custom wide gamut high color satellite image decoded using non-WIC decoder, and asking if they can use surface image source as a background or as a backing source for these items, for the items controlling those layouts. It sounded like
I see these questions, Michael. I mean, one of the things I want to answer, I think so, but I'll say right now that in the whole chain of getting it down to the system, I'm not sure about every stage yet. So I think the answer is yes. You want to make sure that it has an sRGB format, a floating point format, and so I want to double check that. But I see your questions, and I need to investigate to be able to give a more confident answer for next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right. Well, we are down to 1 minute left. Folks, we tackled a ton of questions today. I want to thank everyone watching for asking them and engaging with us in the discussions that we've had today. And I want to thank all the team members who showed up and participated in this rapid fire question answering. As always, if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to write us on GitHub. I know the team tries to make sure that we get answers back to all of those. And if you want to see us have a heartier discussion about it, catch us on the next community call or at Build. And actually, Gabby, I don't know if we know this yet, but do we know if we'll be having a community call next month with Build right around the corner?
Yeah, I kind of talked to that a bit in the beginning. I'm not quite sure yet when it will be. We're planning on having another call near the end of May, but to make sure that it coordinates so that it's not overlapping an important Build talk, we might be rescheduling it from the normal 9 a.m. Pacific time on the third Wednesday. So I'll post the latest on GitHub with the normal discussion that you see.
Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I'll turn it over to Gabby to close out. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. So I think echoing Savoy, it was really great to have everybody on and take all of your questions. We look forward to seeing you again. All right. Bye.